An expert expects the unexpected, and there is no ways that I could have expected the current situation that I find myself in. If it wasn't for one simple strategy that my first property coach taught me, the situation that I find myself in now would be disastrous. A wise man learns from his own mistakes, but a super wise investor learns from the teachings and mistakes of others. I want to share with you that simple strategy that, although may not save your situation now, is a simple strategy that you must incorporate into your future investing, such that in case these kinds of situations happen again, you will be safe and secure. I'll see you on the other side. Today is March the 15th, and at the moment, worldwide coronavirus is certainly having an impact on businesses, on tourism, and actually to every person. It's impacting us in ways in which we didn't foresee, but we're really aware that the economy around this is really going to take an impact. Yes, there's the physical symptoms and the physical impact of the virus itself, but actually what is sometimes even scarier is the impact that this is going to have on the economic and the business scale. And how does this tie into Airbnb and what we're doing? Well, at this moment, just yesterday, for example, I had 3 cancellations in one of my units on Airbnb because of all the travel bans. So I'm hoping that by the time you're watching this, that all of the stuff around the coronavirus has passed, things have got back to normal, and we're looking again at how do we make our money and increase efficiency, optimization, and of course dominate our competition. But what this really highlights is something which for me is really important, both in the investing of Airbnb and our Airbnb models, as well as property investing or even just in business point blank. And that is making sure that you have a buffer, in other words, a cash flow buffer, some way like a nest egg, some liquid cash that can carry you through the rough times, whether it is that interest rates hike, or whether it is that there's huge vacancy rates, or whether it is that your roof blows off and for 3 months you do not have a property that's getting rent, but you still have bonds to pay. You have to be able to manage those cycles, or else you will just be another victim of a motivated seller who has to get rid of a property because they cannot afford to keep those payments. So at this stage, with all the cancellations worldwide of Airbnb, of hosts and guests both canceling, there's going to be some serious impact of people not being able to cover their costs, whether they own the property, hence their bond costs and other expenses like rates and levies and all the other stuff, or for people like myself who love the rent-to-rent model, we've still got rent to pay plus a whole lot of other expenses that may be there. So if you do not have a plan to carry yourself through these tougher times, then you will be a victim to the impact that we're seeing globally. So first and foremost, this is what I kind of call that buffer zone. All of us need to have a certain number of months of liquid cash, or cash that we can make liquid, such that we can use it for our businesses to carry us over. So what does this look for property? Well, in general property investing, the rule of thumb should be that you have between 5 and 7 months of cash flow, now it's cash available to pay off your expenses, as if you have no income, no rental income and no other income coming into that property, which means that for 5 months you could carry all of your costs and you would still be able to survive. So if your expenses are 10,000 Rand, then that means that you have 50,000 Rand which you can access to carry yourself through those 5 months of when when it impacts you. And this should be per property. So for example, at this moment with the Airbnb, I have a certain amount of cash that can be liquid, that can carry me to be able to pay the rent and to be able to see out this coronavirus issue. Whether it takes 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, or up to 5 months, that is what we should be looking at. Which really opens up a question when you have multiple properties in a portfolio, how do you actually manage all this cash flow, right? Well, first and foremost, it's important that you stay disciplined, because that's where the number one killer of all investors' wealth goes, and that is greed. When you get to a point where your properties expand and you start saying, oh, that's okay, I've got 7 properties and I've got this amount of cash and it will carry all of them, there's a risk there, a risk that if your calculation is wrong, or if something goes bad on one property, it could, like a house of dominoes, house of cards, actually start impacting all the others. And that's where the property investor, when they get to a certain point, start to get cocky in a way, start to maybe get overconfident in thinking that they can predict what's happening. No one predicted the coronavirus. No one saw that what was going to happen at this moment was remotely possible. Yes, we all know that there perhaps are viruses or that there are impacts, but this one kind of snuck up on us and it impacted us so quickly in that literally travel bans, people can't leave countries. Everyone everywhere is just shutting shop. And of course, Airbnb has responded by just allowing cancellations at no cost or penalty to either guest or host. So this really warrants that you need to make sure that you're accumulating, storing your cash buffer to be able to carry yourself for between 5 to 7 months of expenses with no extra income. Where do I put the buffer? Well, I put them into access bonds. That means that I have a bond and I have an access facility that extra money I put back into the bond, right, which decreases the bond amounts, but is only there for emergencies. And this is where that issue of self-discipline really comes to be, because the investor starts thinking, oh, I've got $500,000 sitting there. I could take that out and put that as a deposit for another property and I can expand my portfolio. But if that money is set aside to actually carry yourself through tough times, then when the tough times hit, everything starts falling apart. So that self-discipline is really, really critical. For example, just 6 months ago, in one of my commercial properties, my school property, where our rentals are 60,000 Rand a month, the school defaulted for 3 months in a row. So that was close to 200,000 Rand that they defaulted. And I had to carry the school through that time until we could evict them and get the income back on track. And of course, schools are not easy things to just replace. You don't just suddenly get a new tenant, advertise and get a new tenant, right? So we really need to make sure that we could carry ourselves through that period of time. And if I didn't have a certain buffer in place in the access bond that I could take out and actually use to keep the cash flow going and the expenses paid and the bonds paid, then I would have to have let go of the property, which would have therefore been probably foreclosed. It would have been sold on the absolutely cheap, and of course everything falls apart. So really, this lesson, if anything, is a classic example of how the smart investor, how you need to make sure that whether you've got an Airbnb or managing the Airbnb, or whether you've got your own properties, that you're calculating and decreasing, minimizing the risk, mitigating that risk of if interest rates change or vacancy goes longer or something happens. For example, what would happen as well if a gang, some kind of gangster or mob, moved into your apartment or into the apartment next door? What happens if someone hijacked the building and suddenly you can't pay for 2 to 3 months while a whole lot of the police come in and trying to evict? What would happen if you have a really noisy neighbor who makes it a point to piss off your tenants such that your tenants actually say, I'm out, and you can't replace them? You need to be able to have that buffer. That is an astute investor, a smart investor, an investor who understands how to manage risks. And if you can manage the risk, then everything else is a bonus and on the upside. So at this moment with the coronavirus, yes, it's impacting me, but I have planned for certain situations like this so that I can still ride this out. But I promise you that if you also have cash available at this time and have access to funding, this would also be an incredible opportunity, because people are going to have to be selling their properties very quickly if, for example, they are doing Airbnb or something else where they just cannot carry the cash. The banks are not going to be kind and just say, oh, we understand the coronavirus, therefore we won't be claiming back on our bonds, or we will give you a payment holiday. Unlikely. This is a business, and business around the world, everyone's going to be feeling it, and it's going to be incredibly important that you can manage this. So on the one hand, we've got a crisis, and on the other hand, we've got an incredible opportunity. So if this happens again, which, as I'm saying, I'm hoping that this will have passed by the time you're watching this, remember that if you can solve a problem that no one else can solve, that's where the value and the wealth lies, and money flows to where value is. In certain situations like this, you keep your eyes open, not only for what could go wrong, but for the opportunities that become available. I'm predicting that a lot of people who are doing the rent-to-rent Airbnb model are going to have serious difficulty over the next 2 to 3 months. They do not have cash flows. They do not know how to handle this. They do not know how to also just perhaps cut their prices so that they're just breaking even, or perhaps they're cutting them to, yes, have a negative cash flow, but 2,000 Rand a month is manageable as opposed to just vacancy for 2 months. So my plan at the moment, and I'll show you how I'm going to do it online as well, is I'm going to cut my prices really low so that it really stands out amongst all my other competitors. Because I would rather it be so obvious to choose me, and all I have to do then is actually mitigate the negative the cash flow, which I can manage in any case, but I want to make sure that I'm even lessening that scenario. So two things: have your cash flow of about 5 to 7 months expenses as if you had no income, and then secondly, implement the kind of strategies which I'm going to touch base on right now around how to actually therefore kind of crisis manage your apartment so that you're actually still staying ahead in the tough times that you have ahead.